Welcome. I'd really appreciate if you could drop a comment with your thoughts and reactions as you listen. Your feedback helps me craft better stories for you. Robert Nash poured himself a glass of scotch and clicked through the pages alone in his basement once more. His years on the force were behind him now, but the files remained. Unfinished business still lingered in every folder, every photo, including put together in time. The Sanderson murderer, a killer who snatched young women from the streets of Boston a decade ago. 4 victims, all tortured and left for the tide. Nash led the investigation, but the trail ran cold. Witnesses stopped talking, leads went nowhere, and the man responsible was still out there. Nash opened the Sanderson file with a weary sigh. Familiar faces stared back, lives cut short while their killer danced free. It was maddening. Disgust rose like bile in his throat at the failure. The injustice of it all while friends and relatives mourned, left with nothing but a box of what? Ifs to bury. A man should pay for his sins. But Nash couldn't deliver, and he lived with that shame every day since. A chime rang from his laptop, pulled up articles from years past. Updates on cold cases from other jurisdictions, hyping a new lead or person of interest that went nowhere. The same old song and dance playing on loop across the country. It seemed these types of files never closed. The monsters never caught. Victims were forgotten while killers slipped further into darkness, destined to claim new prey, unless an angel of vengeance appeared from the shadows. Nash scrolled aimlessly, skimming headlines when a forum thread caught his eye. A discussion on one of the hidden corners of the dark web he knew lurked below the surface. An anonymous title read, "The Real Identity of the Sanderson Murderer Revealed." His heart skipped. Nash opened the post, scanning frantically for details. The op claimed access to never-before-seen files, witness statements ignored by police, and evidence that conclusively pointed to a man living freely in Portland, Maine all these years. Names, dates, quotes. It was laid out methodically, like a court dossier. But how could these anonymous posters possibly have such granular knowledge of his case? Nash read on, scanning comment chains debating the theory. Their points aligned perfectly with details never released. Details he knew in his gut but couldn't prove. It was uncanny, like these shadowy sleuths had somehow peered over his shoulder all those nights in the files. Nash rubbed his jaw. Doubts and hope swirling as old questions clawed their way back from the grave. Was it really possible? Did the Sanderson killer actually walk among them all this time? He had dismissed countless online solutions before, but something felt different about this post. Real, as if a key lay within reach to finally truly solve the first case that haunted him, and to find the justice denied to 4 innocent souls. Nash knew he would get no rest until he learned the truth. He typed a reply requesting a private message with the one who started it all, the one called simply the administrator. Dr. Sienna Blair scrolled through her case files. A fresh set of remains arrived under her scalpel this week, demanding answers. But her mind wandered tonight, drawn back to the curious message received days prior, its brief words carrying more mystery than any autopsy. A private message from someone calling himself the administrator had appeared without warning in her inbox. He claimed insider knowledge of her work with law enforcement, bringing up classified details only she and a select few should know. Yet the sender's true purpose and identity were veiled by layers of encryption. The administrator stated he represented an online community dedicated to analyzing unsolved crimes through open-source research and forensic sleuthing. They had noticed her profile and sought her assistance analyzing a case that puzzled even their collective intellect. Now, an esteemed member, a retired detective, expressed doubts about their findings that only she could alleviate. Curiosity piqued. Sienna agreed to review the dossier discreetly, on one condition. She must meet this detective and assess his credibility firsthand. A meeting was arranged for that night at a secluded bar off the records, where she now sat alone, nursing coffee, suspicions rising with each passing minute. Just then, a grizzled man entered and surveyed the room, eyes locking on hers. He introduced himself as Robert Nash and slid into the booth, clutching a manila file. "This had better be good," he muttered, skepticism etched across weathered features. Sienna got straight to business. "The administrator claims to have evidence exonerating the official suspect in your Sanderson murder case. Walk me through it." Nash took a shaky breath and launched into the sickening details, his passionate recount hinting at wounds still raw. As he spoke, Sienna analyzed test results and photos provided, piecing together the story. Disturbing logical gaps emerged she had overlooked, raising doubts about a witness whose alibi was seeming far less solid than once presumed. Sienna hesitated to offer judgment either way, but Nash sensed her wavering conviction. He leaned forward intently. "Exactly. This administrator says the killer is really someone connected to that witness, helping them cover their tracks. And I think they're right." Nash pulled out a photograph that made Sienna gasp. "When I searched their home address today, I found this hidden away. It changes everything." Robert Nash paced his living room, the administrator's message looping in his mind. Their unconventional partnership had bore strange fruit already, steering him toward truths in the Sanderson case. No outsider could discover otherwise. Yet working with anonymous figures dwelling in the netherworld gave him pause. Who exactly was this administrator, and what ulterior motives guided their games of justice? Did they truly pursue only light or welcome darkness if it served their ends? These hidden conversations hinted at greater powers and knowledge. Arising from the shadows of the digital underworld. What sort of devil had Nash invited into his life by engaging them? A chime pulled him from thought. A new message from the administrator awaited, as if summoning him on cue. Nash steeled himself and opened the file, expecting more case notes, but found only 3 cryptic words. "We must meet." He stared at the screen, weighing the provocation. Reason said this was a line best left uncrossed, but his instincts urged further steps into the abyss, if it meant finally closing one open wound, redeeming past failures. And so, after minutes that felt like hours, Nash typed 4 letters of his own. When, where? He received coordinates for an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, far off usual grids. Nash knew what it meant to tread into such den of secrets willingly, but his thirst for answers overpowered caution, and silently he dressed and disappeared into the night. At the rendezvous, Nash clicked his flashlight, scanning the musty interior for any signs of life. From the shadows, a mechanized voice commanded him to halt, and he spun, finding empty space where a figure should stand. Speakers buzzed, carrying a distorted yet assured tone. "We meet at last, Detective. I understand you have doubts about my methods and goals. Let me ease your mind." The administrator launched into a soliloquy, their fervent belief system spilling forth. That justice had failed, systems were corrupt, and heroes must rise from the cracks between to set wrongs right however necessary. Their community served that righteous need, uncovering what agencies refused under pressure and politics. But to Nash, it was an ideology opening countless doors to darkness, with no true oversight to check excess. As they debated ethics versus results, Nash sensed the gleam of a formed fanatic beneath the veil, one who viewed people as game pieces in their revolution. A chilling realization set in that, for all his claims, the administrator's true agenda remained thinly veiled, and far more sinister ideals likely pulsed beneath the surface. What rifts had Nash truly slipped through by indulging their games, and how deeply was he now embroiled? Nash arrived at the morgue before dawn, dragging his exhausted body through automatic doors. After a harrowing night, he came seeking counsel from the only soul he now trusted. Inside the quiet halls, he found Dr. Sienna Blair already at her autopsy, shadows darkening the hollows under her bloodshot eyes. Setting aside scalpels, She turned, giving his hand a lingering squeeze. "I heard about the break-in. Are you all right?" Nash nodded, searching for calm amid the churning sea within. "I will be, once we put an end to this." He slid files across the gleaming steel between them, new horrors within dragging her gaze down. "Last night, the administrator crossed a line," Nash began. "They obtained records only I should possess. Now it seems they've targeted others tied to my case, leaving a gruesome message at the home of my former partner. Photos showed splattered walls and a chilling message scrawled in blood." Blair exhaled sharply. "We must find who's really pulling the strings before the body count rises." Nash continued, piecing clues into a dark mosaic. "I traced the records theft to an insider, but that leads to more questions. My guess, the administrator has accomplices planted throughout the system, tipping them off as we close in on their true identity." Blair scowled. "This has spun well out of our control. We need to draw them out into the open, where the law can intervene." An idea sparked in Nash's eye. "The administrator wants a game, do they? Then let's give them one. I'll leak false intel pointing to a major break in the case, luring our friend into revealing themselves. With your help analyzing the digital forensics, we can uncover their real identity and location." Blair smiled faintly. "A digital sting. I like it. Let me reach out discreetly to the feds. I know agents who can help contain this situation." That evening, Nash logged onto hidden forums, spreading fabricated updates that the killer was in custody but new evidence, implicating higher powers, emerged from their computer. Within hours, replies swarmed, demanding the truth. Then, a private message appeared. "Meet alone tonight, Doc 17. If you want your answers, detective. I can give you more than you bargained for." Nash forwarded the message to Blair and the federal contact. The game was set. Now they must spring the trap before the administrator realized too late they had stumbled into a sting of their own. The choppy waters lapped against wooden pillars as Nash strode down the dilapidated dock, flashlight in hand. In the shadowy distance, a lone figure waited, back turned. "I knew you couldn't resist unearthing the truth," came a woman's voice, calm yet piercing. She turned with a smile. "Welcome, detective. Let's conclude our game, shall we?" Nash halted, gut twisting. Before him stood Assistant DeClaire Hansen, elegant even in the dead of night. The trusted friend who aided his investigations for years, now a stranger wearing her skin. "Surprised," Hansen purred. "I've always been steps ahead, manipulating events from within the halls of justice you held so dear. But the system is rotten, and heroes like us must rise to fix it." Her eyes gleamed with fervor that sent a chill through Nash. All the signs were there, had he not been blind. Hansen's uncanny access to details, ability to steer probes away from certain targets, and the file's theft meant to point fingers elsewhere when her role was almost revealed. As she monologued, Nash's grip tightened around his crumpled notepad. The plan was coming together. He'd only keep her talking until backup arrived. Sirens suddenly pierced the air, disrupting Hansen's rant. Nash saw her calculating mind churning to escape as agents emerged with weapons drawn. But there was no slipping these net this time. "It's over, Claire," Nash stated, weary soul finding solace in this small victory, watching her be cuffed and led away. He knew darkness would always lurk in hearts of even friends. But for one night at least, the ghosts of victims past could rest easy, while a new dawn offered hope of true justice. In the weeks after, lives moved on. Blair privately thanked Nash for helping uncover a larger conspiracy. And though scars of the past remained, retired Detective Robert Nash awoke each day with purpose now, knowing that even in a broken system, one good man could still make a difference by pursuing light and truth wherever it may lead. Rain lashed the grimy windows as Jenna curled up on the patched sofa, clutching a tattered throw pillow to her chest. The old apartment felt as empty and lifeless as she did inside since Ryan's shocking demise 3 days ago. According to Detective Mason, it had been an unfortunate hiking accident, but Jenna knew the real truth, or at least she feared it was her fault. All because of that damnably angry post in a drunken stupor a week ago, venting about how Ryan deserved to suffer. Now her vitriolic words haunted her mind relentlessly, mingling with gruesome images of his battered corpse. A soft buzz jolted her from the macabre memories. Jenna fumbled for her phone, blinked away tears. A message from an unknown number. "I see you've had quite an ordeal. Perhaps we could help each other." Her blood ran cold. Who was this stranger, and how did they know about Ryan? Hands trembling, she opened the link. It led to a disturbing forum populated by shadowy figures, anonymously trading secrets, schemes, and plots for dark amusement and catharsis. Her post from that awful night stared back, gaining ominous replies cheering for escalation. Panic seized her lungs in an icy vice. She scanned the cryptic screen names for clues, stopping at one ominously familiar to her shattered heart. Better lucky next time. It was Ryan's secret username, the one he'd used to flirt online behind her back for months. Fury mingled with horror as ugly possibilities crashed through her mind. Had her words. No, it couldn't be. Jenna scoured Ryan's digital trail for answers with growing dread. His browsing history led her to this forbidden corner of the web, where vengeful souls anonymously enacted twisted fantasies through ambiguous manipulation. Was someone toying with her, making her regret airing dirty laundry? What demon had she unwittingly summoned with her pain? She slammed the laptop shut, fighting vertigo. This was all too much, and yet she couldn't let it go. Not if there was the slightest chance her spiteful post contributed to Ryan's fall. Jenna had to warn Detective Mason, convince him something more sinister than chance was at work. She had to find proof before anyone else paid for her moment of blind wrath. With steely resolution, Jenna grabbed her coat and strode into the howling night, determined to unlock the secret truth haunting her waking mind. Come hell or high water, she would lift the veil on the shadowy influence that seemed to be preying upon her every regret. The rain had eased to a dull drizzle by the time Jenna arrived at the police station. She strode past the front desk into the dreary labyrinth of tile and fluorescent lights, following snippets of conversation to Detective Mason's desk. He glanced up, irritation fading to concern at her wild-eyed expression. "Ms. Benson, is everything all right?" She gathered her courage. "I know you think I'm crazy, but please, just hear me out." Jenna recounted her unsettling online discoveries in a rush, begging Mason to take another look at Ryan's digital footprint. He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Look, I understand you're upset, but blaming shadowy internet figures won't bring you closure. These things happen." "But what if it's not a coincidence?" Jenna insisted. "Humor me, detective. Check his search history. There has to be a connection." Mason hesitated, then gave a curt nod. "All right, I'll take another look, but don't get your hopes up." They huddled over his desktop as Mason accessed Ryan's cloud data. At first, it seemed innocuous. Casual browsing, mundane messages. But a distinct pattern emerged the deeper they delved. Dozens of visits to the anonymous forum Jenna found, along with encrypted late-night messages on a dark web chat client. The most unsettling lead was a thread started in Ryan's username just days ago, ominously titled "One Down." Who's next? Replying users encouraged more drastic actions, while the original poster teased they were just getting started. A muscle ticked in Mason's jaw. I'll admit, this raises some questions, but it's still circumstantial. His voice died as a frantic call erupted over the radio. 10:50. We've got another one. Young male, mid-20s, multiple lacerations. found in the ravine near Blackwood Trail. Jenna blanched. That was the very path cutting through the woods behind her apartment. Mason grabbed his coat, shooting her a pointed look. "Stay here. I'll handle this myself." But as his sedan sped away, Jenna took off on foot through the rain toward the crime scene, tape flickering in the gloom. She had to see for herself what fresh horror awaited. Slipping under the barrier, Jenna crept among the shadowy pines until a familiar mop of sandy hair came into view under the flashlight beams. It was Ryan's friend Caleb, his once, smiling face practically unrecognizable beneath the sheet. Jenna stifled a gasp, remembering their inside jokes on that very thread. She lurched away, shaken, as medics zipped the body bag with grim finality. This was no coincidence. Someone was killing people from her life one by one, orchestrated through uncanny precision. But who was pulling the puppet strings? Detective Mason rushed over, grabbing Jenna's arm. "I told you to stay back. This is a crime scene." Yet she detected a new undercurrent of belief in his tone. "Come on, let's go have another chat at the station." The flickering neon sign of the all-night diner felt like an oasis in the storm, as Jenna nursed a stale cup of coffee across from Mason. His analytical gaze swept over her drawn features. "All right, Miss Benson, lay it out for me." Jenna recounted her theory that someone was enacting vengeance through the dark web forum, using her drunken words as a macabre script. But who? And how could they possibly know such private details about her life? Unless a sickening realization struck. It has to be someone close to Ryan. Someone with access to his online profiles and friends. Mason arched a brow. "You have a suspect in mind?" There was someone. Mason frowned. "This is no game." "We don't have time." Jenna slammed her fist, scattering silverware. "If I'm right, Tyler could be planning his next attack right now. I need to confront him, get proof for your case." Mason sighed. "Fine, but I'm coming with you for backup." They drove in tense silence to Tyler's apartment. Inside, a shadow darted across the front window. Mason drew his weapon. "Stay close, and let me do the talking." He pounded on the door. No reply. Mason shouldered it open, weapon raised. But the studio was empty, back door hanging ajar. Jenna spotted a folded note on the couch. "Want to play? Meet me at the docks at midnight. There's still time for your next star to fall." "He's luring me into a trap," Jenna cried. "I have to go. End this tonight." Mason's eyes blazed. "The hell you are. That psycho wants you alone and vulnerable. We'll set our own trap with backup." He radioed for reinforcements. Night fell like a funeral shroud over the wharf. Jenna hid behind oil drums as Mason briefed his team. A lone figure emerged onto the creaking pier, silhouetted against the churning ocean. Right on time, Tyler's voice carried over the surf. Come out, wherever you are." With a feral cry, Jenna leapt up and charged him. But Tyler was ready, grabbing her in a chokehold. His wild eyes gleamed triumph in the shadows. "It's over. I finally win the game." Then Mason's booming order echoed. With Tyler in custody, Jenna let out a sigh of relief, believing the nightmare was finally over. But Mason, ever the vigilant detective, wasn't convinced. "It's too clean, too easy," he muttered, eyes scanning over the myriad of digital breadcrumbs left on the dark web. The more they delved, the clearer it became. As Mason's skilled fingers flew over the keyboard, tracing the digital shadows, Jenna's phone buzzed with a chilling message. "You're not safe." The words echoed in her mind, a stark reminder that the web of deceit was still ensnaring them. Their investigation took a darker turn, leading them through the convoluted labyrinths of anonymous forums. Mason, with a blend of old-school detective work and modern tech savvy, unmasked the true mastermind, the elusive admin who had been orchestrating this macabre puppet show from the start. Meanwhile, Jenna grappled with a terrifying realization. The threats were coming closer, now aimed directly at her. They were being watched, every move scrutinized by a hidden enemy with eyes everywhere. In a breakthrough moment, Mason decrypted a message that pointed to an unexpected suspect. Dr. Ackerman, Ryan's former mentor. The revelation hit Jenna like a freight train. Ackerman, the unassuming scholarly figure who had always lurked in the background of Ryan's stories. Confronting Ackerman was like stepping into a psychological minefield. Jenna's mother, her eyes filled with fear, was the bait in his twisted trap. But Jenna, drawing on her deep understanding of human behavior, turned the tables. She wove a web of words and wit, ensnaring Ackerman in his own game. As the tension reached a fever pitch, Mason burst onto the scene, his timing impeccable. Together, they subdued Ackerman, freeing Jenna's mother from his clutches. In the aftermath, a network of Ackerman's followers, cult, like in their devotion, were rounded up and brought to justice. The ordeal left scars, both visible and invisible. Jenna, once a carefree young woman, now carried the weight of her experiences in her steely gaze. Mason, who had walked into this case with skepticism, now looked at Jenna with a profound respect. "You're one hell of a woman," he said, admiration clear in his voice. As Jenna walked away from the chaos, the sun breaking through the clouds seemed to symbolize her newfound strength and resilience. She had stared into the abyss, danced with her demons, and emerged not unscathed, but undefeated. The story closed on a contemplative note, a reflection on the darkness that lurks within and the power of empathy to overcome the vengeful shadows of the human heart. The incessant beeps of the old washing machine filled the damp basement with an irritating rhythm. Emma lifted the sodden sheets from the sloshing water and wrung them out with clenched fists, unable to tear her mind from the looming threat of eviction. Another late payment, and she'd be left homeless on the streets. As the final load spun, she rubbed her aching shoulders and stared blankly at the whitewashed walls. This can't go on. A few scattered jobs and her meager savings wouldn't sustain her for long in the overpriced city. She needed real money, and fast. Exhausted, Emma trudged upstairs, wishing not for the first time that her parents were still alive to help. But that painful memory was long buried, and she was determined to survive on her own terms. In the cramped bedroom, her phone lit up with an email from the mysterious man she'd met online the week prior. "I may have an opportunity for you," the message read. "Are you available tonight?" Against her better judgment, Emma typed a weary yes. Anything was better than another empty night of relentless worrying. She arrived at the nondescript warehouse on time and found the man, whose name she still didn't know, waiting in his sleek black vehicle. "Get in," he instructed brusquely, and Emma complied, steeling her nerves. "I need someone discreet to assist with a project. The pay is $500 upfront plus commission." Emma's eyes widened at the sum. That was more than she made in a month. "What would I have to do?" she asked cautiously. A smug smile crept onto his lips. "I have a small business venture online. You would be responsible for recruitment and communications through the site." He handed her a slip of paper with a weird web address written on it. "Follow the instructions carefully. Let me know if you have any difficulty." The predatory gleam in his eyes set Emma on edge, but another part of her hesitated. £500 could solve so many problems right away, and it was only one night's work, right? Against her better judgment, Emma pocketed the paper and got out of the vehicle without a word, doubting her desperation yet seeing no other options. Alone in her dim room that night, Emma clicked the strange link with trembling fingers. When the unsettling dark web portal loaded, she realized with a sickening jolt exactly what sort of project she had gotten herself embroiled in. Messages from anonymous accounts filled the screen, demanding recruitment for depraved acts that churned Emma's stomach. But it was too late to turn back now. Emma clicked listlessly through the disturbing site, responding to messages with as little detail as possible. Each new recruit intensified her inner conflict, yet she told herself it was merely an online role, her sole mission to earn the promised money and escape this nightmare. Days blurred into a haze of dread as demands escalated. One regular client, going by the alias Collector, took an unsettling interest in her updates and photos of the recruits. His transactions carried hefty bonuses, so Emma plastered on a stoic facade and played along, hurriedly deleting the exchanges afterward. Her nights offered no refuge from the sinister underworld seeping into her waking hours. Horrific images invaded her fitful dreams, strangers' haunted faces overlapping with her own. Each morning, Emma awoke trembling and checked the site with a growing sense of doom. Sure enough, one girl had gone completely inactive. When Emma nervously messaged the man about it, he dismissed her concern with an ominous chuckle. "Accidents happen to those unwilling to have some fun," he replied callously. "Stay focused on the task at hand, and all will be well." But Emma could no longer pretend this was a simple business venture. The missing recruit's smiling profile haunted her, a grim reminder of the human costs behind each anonymous click. She had to find a way to expose the truth before any other lives were lost to this depraved underground network. Under the guise of recruiting, Emma began quietly documenting clues on a secret notebook, careful to leave no digital trace. Names, locations, transaction records, anything that could shed light on identities or the true scope of the operation. With each new discovery, her dread grew alongside a steely determination to bring these monsters to justice, whatever the risks. One night, a message from Collector twisted her gut with a chilling request. "Your services are required for a private meeting," it read. "Non-compliance will not be tolerated." Emma's hands shook, torn between her growing revulsion and desperate need to maintain her role a while longer. Stalling for time, she sent a non-committal reply and fled to her dark bedroom, collapsing into fitful dreams as gears turned furiously in her mind. There had to be a way out. But in this game of shadows, one misstep could mean becoming the prey instead of the hunter, and Emma was running out of moves fast. The next morning's chill seeped through cracked windows as Emma paced, clutching her frazzled notes. She needed answers, and there was only one source left to question: the mysterious man controlling it all from the shadows. Donning her threadbare coat, Emma marched to the warehouse, steeled for confrontation. But as she shoved open the rusting door, a sickening sight stopped her short. Crumpled on the concrete amid a widening pool of dark liquid lay the recruit she knew as Lisa, dull eyes staring blankly into nothing. For an instant, Emma froze, then lurched forward with a choked sob. But it was too late. Lisa's battered frame lay deathly still. Rage and sorrow boiled within as bitter tears wet her cheeks. This monster had gone too far, and he would pay for his crimes. Footsteps sounded behind, and cold malice laced the man's measured tones. A shame. This one's spirit couldn't be broken. "I warned you the work carries risks. Turn around now, and your part ends here." Emma spun to face him slowly, composure cracking. "This isn't work. It's human trafficking and murder. Why are you doing this?" she demanded through clenched jaw. Amusement danced in his eyes. "Why does anyone lust for power and gold, my dear? People crave that which is forbidden. I simply provide. As for loose ends, well, accidents do occur in this line of work." Rage surged white, hot through Emma's veins, temporarily eclipsing reason. With a wordless shriek, she launched at the man, but his wiry strength pinned her easily, twisting her wrist until bone threatened to crack. "Struggle is useless, little one. Embrace your role, or face the same fate. I'm sure Collector will find another entertaining use for you." His putrid breath ghosted her ear, eliciting a shudder of revulsion. Through the haze of pain, Emma's mind raced frantically. She had to escape. To expose this nightmare and honor Lisa's sacrifice. Gritting her teeth, she forced her rigid frame to stillness. "Please, I just want to go home. I won't say anything, I swear." The man studied her with calculating eyes, finding no fight left. "Very well, but know that I am always watching. One wrong step, and you will regret it dearly." He released her with a sneer, turning away dismissively. As she fled into the gathering dusk, Emma silently vowed this was far from over. She had a name now, Collector, and with it, a lead to pull back the curtain on these depraved machinations, once and for all. Heavy rain lashed the grim city as Emma huddled over spreadsheets of transactions, referencing aliases with dates and locations. A pattern was emerging, gradually bringing Collector into focus. But each discovery only widened the shadowy web, and she knew pursuing the truth now carried deadly risks. A chime startled her from the screen, an untraceable message from an all-too-familiar sender. "Clever girl trying to run from our game. Meet me tonight or say goodbye to your old life. Collector always gets what he wants in the end." Panic seized Emma's lungs in an icy grip. She had pushed too far, and there was no escaping the trap, now closing fast. Grabbing only the barest essentials, she fled into the howling night, seeking refuge amid the alleys. But Collector's reach seemed to extend everywhere in this place. Dark figures materialized at each turn, driving Emma into constantly smaller, filthier spaces. As the hunt closed in, her limbs burned with exertion while fear clawed at her resolve. At last, a dead end loomed. 3 hulking silhouettes emerged from the gloom, closing in with predatory smiles. "Where you going, sweet thing? We just want to have some fun," one leered, calloused hands reaching. Desperation lent Emma a burst of adrenaline. She lunged low, bowling into the largest pursuer's midsection with a hoarse yell, scrambling over the writhing mass. She summoned her last reserves toward the faint glimmer of salvation, an emergency exit, dim light glowing beyond dirty glass. Fingers grazed cold metal just as iron talons dug into her ankle, yanking her down into a puddle. Water filled her mouth, nose as rough hands pinned her limbs. Through the rushing tide, Collector's hateful visage swam into view. "No more games, little mouse. Your time is up." Metal rasped, a blade glinting alongside his leer. Emma's heart seized. This was the end. Except in that moment, all fear bled away, replaced by calm resolve as her watering eyes met Collector's hollow sockets. If death came tonight, it would not find her broken. With a wordless roar, Emma writhed free of slackened grips and lunged anew for salvation, fingers closing around the lever just as Collector's blade sliced air. Bright light engulfed her trembling frame, and with it, a glimmer of renewed hope. The game was not over yet. Sirens rent the drenched night as Emma staggered into harsh fluorescence, sides heaving. Paramedics swarmed, wrapping thermal blankets around her shivering form and calling out vital signs between terse exchanges into radios. Through chattering teeth, she relayed the vital details: Collector, the trafficking ring, names and locations from her exhaustive research. For the first time, hope stirred that these demons may finally face justice. As an ambulance sped toward the hospital, Emma watched city lights blur by in a daze. She had survived. Over the next few weeks, police made sweeping arrests as the story rocked the local headlines. Collector and several known associates were in custody awaiting trial. But Emma sensed the true puppet master still lurked beyond reach, pulling invisible strings. Only one place still tied everything together: the abandoned warehouse. And with the authorities now between them, Emma knew this fight remained hers alone. Under cover of night, she slipped through twisted halls, memories clinging like cobwebs, until a flicker ahead drained her veins to ice. The man sat calmly by flickering screens, movements assured and predatory as ever behind his eerie facade. So the mouse comes crawling back for the final showdown. I must say I'm impressed by your tenacity, but this is where your game ends. Emma steeled herself, squaring shoulders. Though fear ran rampant, it's over. How many lives have you destroyed for wealth and power? Your clients are in jail while your victims haunt these walls. She gestured wildly at the ghostly figures seeming to emerge from the gloom. A mirthless chuckle rose through the cacophony of clicking keys. Money and pleasure. Is there any nobler pursuit? As for loose ends, accidents will happen. His hand drifted below the table, emerging with a glint of silver. But first, a parting gift for a valiant hero. Say goodbye. Lightning. Fast. He lunged with lethal grace. But Emma was ready, dodging aside and grabbing the weapon in one fluid motion learned through countless nightmares. Their eyes met, and for the first time she saw uncertainty flicker within that abyss. With a primal scream, Emma launched at the man, blade sinking into flesh with a sickening squelch. His eyes bulged in shock before slamming shut forever, body slumping lifeless to the grimy floor. Chest heaving, she let the weapon fall and searched those hateful features one last time for any trace of remaining humanity. Finding none, Emma strode from the warehouse into the graying dawn, liberation and vengeance swirling bitterly within. Monsters walked the city still, preying on society's most vulnerable, and darkness lingered in quiet corners. But here, in this forsaken place, one evil had met its end, and in its demise, a glimmer of light and hope was reborn.